Have you ever just stopped and wondered how you became, well, you? I mean, how does a tiny, completely helpless baby transform into a complex adult with all these unique thoughts and feelings and a place in the world? Today, we're going to dive into the actual blueprint of human development. And this is it. This is our map for the journey. Think of it like the architectural plan for building a person. It maps out every single crucial stage, from our physical beginnings all the way to developing our own moral compass. So this is the big question, right? It's a journey every single one of us is on. But what's so wild is that the mechanics behind it are incredibly structured. So let's break it down, starting from the very foundation. Okay, everything, and I mean everything, starts with a physical. Before we can think complex thoughts or navigate tricky social situations, we have to learn how to master the vehicle we live in, our body. This is all about physical and motor development. And what's so cool is that our physical development isn't just random or chaotic, not at all. It follows a really predictable pattern, almost like an instruction manual. In fact, there are two fundamental rules that dictate exactly how we gain control over our movements. So the first one is the cephalocaudal principle. Now that sounds super complex, I know, but it just means head to toe. A baby learns to lift its head long before it can ever stand on its feet. At the very same time, the proximo-distal principle is happening. This one means development moves from the center of the body outward. So an infant gets control of its torso and its core way before it masters those fine motor skills in its fingers. You see, these two rules, they lay the groundwork for everything else. You see this really clear progression from that initial head and torso control, we build up to more complex manipulative skills, and eventually to really sophisticated stuff like eye-hand coordination. It's a total step-by-step assembly process. All right, so once the physical hardware is coming online, what about the operating system? Well, that brings us right to our mental and intellectual development. You know, the journey of the mind is maybe the most profound one we take. We start out as completely dependent beings. We literally can't survive on our own. The entire goal of our mental development is to move from that state to one of healthy interdependence. And this timeline here shows exactly how we learn to relate to the world. We start with codependence, relying on others for everything. Then comes that familiar phase of counterdependence. Yep, the terrible twos, where we push away to establish our own sense of self. From there, we build independence, learning how to function on our own. But the final, most mature stage is interdependence. That's when we realize that mutual reliance, built on self-esteem and integrity, is the real prize. But of course, we aren't just thinking machines. A huge part of our development is emotional. This is the heart section of our blueprint. And this is where things get really, really interesting. So, why do we have emotions anyway? Well, the functionalist approach says they're not just random feelings. They're actually tools. Emotions serve a real purpose. They help us process thoughts, guide our social behavior, and can even affect our physical health. They're kind of like data, giving us critical information about our world and ourselves. A classic example of emotion serving a function is the Kubler-Ross model for processing grief. It outlines this common progression, right, from denial and anger, through bargaining and depression, and hopefully toward acceptance. Now, not everyone experiences these in a perfect straight line, but it brilliantly shows how our emotions can guide us through a process on a clear, functional path. Okay, so we've covered the body, the mind, and the heart. Let's zoom out. How do we take this individual that we've been building and integrate them into a larger group? This is all about our social and moral development. The key process here is called socialization. Basically, it's how we learn the rules of the game, the customs and practices of our society. It's all about shifting from an I mentality to a we sense and learning to make choices that consider other people. And successful socialization leads to two really key things. First, social awareness. That's the ability to read the room and behave appropriately. And second, and this one is so important, is responsible participation. Not just existing in society, but actively engaging in it while actually caring about the welfare of others. And this leads to a fascinating question. Once we learn how society expects us to act, how do we build our own internal code, our own personal sense of right and wrong? Well, that's exactly where moral development comes in. And notice how it's directly connected to our social development. We first learn the social norms, and from that foundation, we build our own ability to distinguish right from wrong, developing our very own personal set of moral principles. So let's just quickly retrace our steps on this blueprint. It all begins with the body, building our physical foundation from head to toe and from the center out. From there, we develop the mind, evolving from total dependence all the way to a mature state of healthy interdependence. Next up comes the heart, where we learn that our emotions are not random at all, but they're functional tools that help guide our path. And finally, we find our place in society, learning its rules so that we can then build our own internal moral compass. But here's the most crucial takeaway of all. None of these things happen in a vacuum. Our physical abilities, our intellectual growth, our emotional state, our social skills, they are all deeply interconnected. They are constantly influencing each other, always shaping the person we are in the process of becoming. And that process, it never truly stops. This blueprint for growth is a lifelong project. So the only question left is this: when you look at your own blueprint, what part are you going to build next?